everybody, I'm Steve Castro. I'm the co-founder of Clickshake Games. The other co-founder, his name is Jay Zebarth. You guys might have heard of him possibly. He goes by Zebarth. This is our website, and I didn't bring any slides, so I'm just going to leave that up there. Hopefully it's not too distracting and you guys can just can still focus on what I'm talking about. So the topic for me is how to make it as an indie game developer, or how to be successful. And the first thing I just want to talk about is what does success mean? Because for a lot of people it means a lot of different things. And so I kind of want to talk about what success means to me, and hopefully some of you guys can relate to that. And then I'm going to kind of share my story with you and how I've been able to get to where I am today, and hopefully you guys can take some things from that. So what is success? You know, for a lot of people it's a lot of money, for a lot of people it's fame. For me, I want to be able to do what I love for as long as I possibly can. And so, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to make a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be famous, but as long as I can make games, you know, until I'm like 80 years old, as long as I still love it by then that's a great thing. So that's kind of who I'm talking to, is people who feel similar to that. You know, if you're looking for something like a get-rich-quick or something, I don't think game design or development is for you at all. You certainly won't hear it from me. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So Clickshake Games, like I mentioned, it's a two-man team. There's me, I'm the programmer, and I do some game design, and I also take care of the business side of things. And then my partner, Jay Zebarth, he does the art and story writing as well as a lot of the game design. And so I've personally released over 20 games in my life. Some of them are smaller, and more recently I've done some bigger ones. Some of the games that we've released are, you can see we've done several Journeys of Remus, The Visitor. Both of those are a series of games. Several Journeys of Remus, I think, has like 5 games in the series, and The Visitor has 3. And then Paradox Embrace, this is the game that I designed in 2009. So other than that, I've also done some work for Sports Illustrated for Kids, and as well as Comedy Central. So I'll talk about that and how I got the chance to do work for those in a little bit here. So like I said, I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about my story and then what I believe, you know, has worked for me. So I'm originally from Ashtabula, which is east of here. It's about an hour east of here. And that's where I went to high school. And at the time, I was totally sure that I wanted to be an architect. I took 4 years of drafting. I took computer-aided drafting. And then in the year 2000, that's when I discovered Newgrounds.com. And the fact that you could take this program called Flash and you could just start making games. And that's when I was no longer going to be an architect and I was going to make games. And so a lot of what I'm going to say here is actually, you know, echoing some of the sentiments that Ian has, because I'm totally all about just picking yourself up by your bootstraps and just starting to make games today, because that's basically what my story is. And so, you know, in that first year I had made 2 games, and one was just a simple, you know, catch the falling objects kind of game, just really simple. And then the second one I made was just a clone of the game Snake or Nibbles. And I think a lot of people have made that clone, but, you know, like Ian was saying, it's definitely important to just start small. And, you know, for me, I just wanted to see if I could do it, and I put it out there on Newgrounds, and, you know, it was just kind of for fun, and I wasn't really sure exactly what I want to do. I actually applied for a DigiPen, which is a school for game design out in Washington State, but I was accepted there, but I actually decided to stay more locally because, you know, I hate to just uproot and leave my family and my, you know, I was born here and I grew up here and stuff like that, so I actually decided to go ahead and just stay here locally in Columbus, or I ended up in Columbus going to DeVry University, and instead of game programming, I just took general programming. And so when I was at college, I continued to develop my own Flash games inside. And in 2001, I had my own website called Entropic Order. And, you know, I had a little bit of a community going there. I had some of my musings and some of the games I put out there. And one of the games I created was called Rooftop Skater. Now, this is where it gets interesting because Rooftop Skater, it was just something I made for fun. I was playing a whole lot of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and I wanted to make my own. So I put it out there. One of the awesome things that happened about that was it ended up getting featured on Tech TV's Site of the Night. So it's kind of unfortunate because I didn't even get to see this. There's a website link where they talk about it and people told me about it. I never ended up getting to see it. But that's like a really cool thing. Here I'm just making these games for fun, just kind of putting them out there, and it got picked up on TV. And then next thing you know, that's when Sports Illustrated for Kids actually contacted me saying, hey, we'd love for you to take this game, beef it up, and we're going to pay you. And I'm like, money, really? I mean, I was just making this for fun. You actually want to pay me, so that's amazing. So yeah, they paid me then. That was my first paying gig, making games. And it led to the opportunity to make another game for them called Sick Tricks BMX, which it's kind of also a similar theme, extreme sports. You can go up on the rooftop still. And yeah, I mean, it was a really amazing opportunity for me. And so the big lesson that I want to share is just, if you're somebody who, let's say you've kind of taken Ian's advice already, you're already starting to make games, and maybe you want to take it to the next level. You want to go beyond the hobby, and you want to start making a little bit of money at it, or just, you want to go further than a hobby, basically, in whatever form that is. Then my biggest advice is, first of all, you got to educate yourself. I mean, that should be a no-brainer, but a lot of indie people think that, I don't really need to go to school, and you don't have to, but it's been totally instrumental for me to lay that foundation. Even the drafting experience that I had, the HTML classes that I took in high school, all of that was very instrumental. And I think even more important than the education, which is very important, is self-learning. Because, I've heard of people who want to make games, so they went to school and took some classes, and then they're hoping to get a job, but they're not working on projects. And, game development takes a lot of passion. And so if you're not actively working on it and you're hoping to just get into the industry or whatever from just what you learn in school, it's probably not going to be enough. But so the other thing is, once you've learned a little bit about making games and you've done it, put yourself out there. I mean, I see a lot of people who, maybe they've made a couple games and they've showed it to a few people, but my big recommendation is make your own website. I mean, learn a little bit of HTML and JavaScript, get your own domain, and have your own website. Because, like, the first step is, it's great if you can get your stuff onto, like, DeviantArt or Newgrounds, but, your portfolio, it's mixed in with everyone else's stuff. And if you have a way to direct people to your own work where they're not distracted by other people's or comparing it, they just see, this is what I'm about, you have the opportunity to control the formatting and present it in the way that is best for you, then I think you can get a lot of good opportunities like that. And it shows that you're really actually serious about it, that you are someone who wants to take it a little further than just a hobby. So, and what's awesome is, we've continued to just put ourselves out there. We have this website now where it's just, it's just sitting there. You can come play our games. And, very, very often, more and more, I think, people come to our site, they see what we've done, and they're saying, hey, we'd like you to make this game for us. And, that's the thing, as an independent, you might want to, only make the games that you want to make, that you've always dreamed about making. But, it's nice if you put yourself out there and at least have the opportunity available to you that if someone says, hey, we'd like you to make this game for us, at least you're out there and you have the option to say yes or no to that. Because if you just blanket decide, I don't want to do that, I'm not available for it, then you might find yourself out of money, and then you got to go back to working for the man. Whereas the things we've been able to do, client work isn't always glamorous and it isn't always fun, but it is actually very fun. For instance, when Comedy Central contacted us, they wanted us to make a game for the premiere of their show, Ugly Americans. And so, I mean, that was really awesome because they gave us assets from the show, and we were able to take the characters and get the actual voice acting from the real voice actors for the animated show. So yeah, it's like, you're working for a client and they're kind of calling the shots, but there's some really fun opportunities out there. So put yourself out there. I mean, that is my first message that I think has been critical in me getting to where I've gotten to today. And I also just want to wrap up that topic by by saying one of the sayings, it's one of my favorite sayings, which is, luck favors the prepared. I don't know if it's a common cliche or whatever, but it's totally true because, you know, I didn't know these people would be contacting me. But if you put yourself out there, if you develop yourself through education and, you know, you just keep working. And the thing is, don't wait to make your portfolio. You know, once you have even a little bit of something that's worthwhile, go ahead and put it on there like now. And then as you get better and you start to make better games, you can kind of take off the ones that aren't your best work and start to improve it and just tighten it. And over time, your portfolio will get a lot better. But yeah, you know, just by doing that, by preparing yourself with education and just putting yourself out there, when luck strikes, you're ready to take advantage of those opportunities. So the next thing I want to talk about is there's a game I really like. It's called Dust: An Elysian Tale. Have you guys played this game? Have you heard about it? I think it's a great game, and it's not a small game. It's an independent game, but it's actually kind of big. I mean, there's a lot of story. There's a lot of cutscenes that are animated. It got released on Xbox Live Arcade. I don't actually know how financially well it did, but it's a really pretty impressive game. And what I discovered was that a single person made all the programming and all the art. I was blown away. Honestly, I was jealous. I was envious, you know. Here's this guy that's got this successful game on Xbox, and here I am, you know, still making Flash games and hoping to one day maybe get on the Xbox. But what I realized as I was learning more and more about this guy, his name is Dean Dodrell, is that he actually spent pretty much all day, every single day, for like including weekends, for like 3 years straight, mercilessly working on this thing. And that's what happens when you take on like a really big project as one person. And this is kind of a counterpoint to one of the things that Ian was saying. I think that, you know, when you're first starting, it's totally great to just do your own thing. You know, do as much as you can by yourself so that you can learn. Now, when you're ready to take it to the next step, start to work on bigger games, having a good partner is totally crucial, I believe. I personally like to tinker with art and things like that, but you know, really, I went to school for programming, and so if I can focus on what I do best, and I can get somebody that, you know, has the same goals as me and can really work with me, then, you know, together we can make something totally better than, you know, either of us could have made on our own. And so, you know, absolutely, a lot of you, how many of you are from Cleveland? Can I see a show of hands, like from this area? Is it most of you? Well, so a lot of you from the local area, you know, you guys know about the local meetup. You know, I absolutely recommend going to things like that, networking, trying to collaborate, and trying to see if you can form, not just, you know, like doing the game jams, but form maybe a longer term collaboration. So like, if you're not from Cleveland or Columbus, where we also have the meetup, you know, like Ian was saying, you know, start up a group if you need to. Anything you can do. Now, in my case, my story in this is that over the years, I had worked with different partners, and a lot of times it's hard to find the right person to work with. And you're going to find people that don't have the same goals of you, or they're flaky, and, you know, they come and go. And that's definitely happened for me. I've worked on a lot of things where, you know, people just go off and do their own thing. But in 2008, I decided that I wanted to seriously look for an animation partner that I could work with on a long-term basis. And I actually emailed Jay, the guy I work with now. I emailed him in 2008, and I said, hey, I like your work, I like what you've done, and I think it could be cool if we could work together. And he actually promptly ignored my email, and I never heard back from him until 2009. Again, I was on Newgrounds.com, and they had a collaboration event called The Power of Three. This is an event designed to encourage programmers, artists, and audio engineers, or, you know, musicians, to come together and collaborate and to make a game. And what happened was, I had talked to Tom Fulp, the owner of Newgrounds, and he had known some of my previous games like Rooftop Skater, and he actually told Jay, hey, you know, this guy's looking for an artist, you know, I think he's decent, maybe you guys should work together. So it turns out, you know, a whole, like, year and a half later, I ended up partnering up with him. So I think, you know, finding a good partner that you can really trust and really depend on, I think it takes a lot of patience. and perseverance, and you just kind of have to stick with it. But if you do, hopefully you guys can find someone like I've been able to. You know, and again, it just comes back to me putting myself out there, because here I am, you know, years after I started originally, still, you know, trying to get ahead, trying to see what I can do, still looking to be involved in collaborations, and I think it paid off, because now he and I are full-time. So like I said, I think I mentioned this, I've been doing full-time development now for 3 years. I started part-time, you know, since like 2000, but I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud of, and something that I feel that I'm somewhat successful at, is just being able to continue to do this for 3 years so far. And it's definitely in large part to having such a good partner who does the art and has some really good characters and stuff like that. So, let's see what time we got here. All right. So of course, you know, my journey hasn't always been a smooth one. And something I just wanted to share was that, so in 2003, I had been working on games for like 3 years. I was really passionate about it. I spent all my free time in the lab at the DeVry University working on Flash games. And one day I came home, I found my window broken, and my apartment had been burglarized. So, you know, they took my Stratocaster guitar, you know, they took my TV, but the worst thing was that they took my computer. And not only that, they took all of my backup CDs, for sure thinking they must have been CDs that they could pawn off or something. So for years, I had all of these projects, a lot of which were fun things that I didn't necessarily, I wanted to finish and I thought they were good ideas, but I never got a chance to finish them, and I never will. And I have to say, I mean, that was an extremely hard thing for me to take, and it really took the wind out of my sails for a number of years. So, you know, about that time, I ended up graduating from college, and I focused on that, and I just got into the corporate world for a while. I stopped doing games, and part of me was thinking, you know, I'd lost so much, and, you know, maybe I should just kind of get my head out of the clouds and start doing something, you know, more legitimate, supposedly. And, you know, I went and got a corporate job for a software company. And so, it sounds kind of terrible when you want to be an independent developer, but I have to say, though, the experience that I got working for the man was extremely valuable, because, I mean, if I had went independent straight out of college, I would not be where I am today, for sure. I mean, I just didn't have the confidence, I just didn't have the discipline. You know, a lot of the technical skills were definitely refined by working for, you know, like a 9-to-5 job. And so, I think one thing I want to recommend is, you know, if you find yourself needing the money and you've got to go work for the corporate, that doesn't have to be the end of your independent career. You know, even if you go do it for a year or two, go there, learn everything you can about, you know, I don't know, just like time management and like how to get projects done efficiently. Maybe some of the business side, because those are things that you can apply when you come back to independent. And the thing is, like I said, all this happened in, you know, 2004, about there, and then in 2008, I started getting the itch again, because I'm like, all right, the corporate thing is pretty cool, you know, I feel like it's rewarding and all that, but I kind of miss being creative, and the company got bought out and it got stressful, and I was like, you know what, I might even lose my job. I mean, the whole department was about to be outsourced to India, and they kept saying, no, we're not going to outsource it, we're going to keep this department, but I was like, I don't really buy it. So I was like, you know, going independent is scary now that I've got student loans. I ended up getting a mortgage. But I realized I don't really have that much more job security working for the man as I might going independent. I mean, I could lose my job at any day. And so I ended up going independent, and sure enough, there's no more departments. So I feel like I dodged a bullet and kind of made the right decision there. It was definitely not easy. It was scary. But, you know, so the thing is, these experiences definitely changed me. I mean, I went from truly, totally independent, I just want to make games for fun, I want to make the games I want to make, to a point where it's like, you know, I don't want to keep working for the man, but at the same time, if I just make whatever and I'm not even thinking about the business side of things, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills either. So I kind of arrived at kind of a practical place where I want to be independent, but I don't want to go do it for a year and kill myself trying. If you've ever watched Indie Game the movie, you might think that that's what being independent means, but there were actually a lot of people that were interviewed for Indie Game the movie that weren't included, and they're probably a lot more normal than people that actually made it in there. Because most of us would prefer to survive after having finished our game and not die in the process. So, you know, I don't want to starve, but I do want to make games. And I think, you know, just having everything lost and taken away from me, it just kind of made me realize that I have goals, I have dreams, and I don't want to have regrets, you know, because when I think about those games I lost, I don't know what they could have been, and maybe in some way I'm kind of immortalizing them, like they would have been amazing, but, you know, I think what I took away from that is if I'm going to set out to do something, I want to finish it. I want it to be pretty good, and I want it to just get out in the world, and then you kind of can't take that away from me. I mean, once it's out on the internet, people have played it, you know, you've heard the reviews, you'll always have that. So, you know, that's why I think it's important to resist the temptation to start a project and then give up on it when it gets hard. You know, especially if you want to make some money at this, but, you know, even if you're a hobbyist, I have to imagine that if you spend, you know, 6 years on the same project and you never quite finish it, I've got to imagine that you're a little dissatisfied and that maybe you'd be a little happier, you know, if you could say, okay, I spent 3 years, I got it out there, yes, it has flaws, but I'm going to work on that for the next one. So, kind of the place I arrived at, like I said, it's a very practical place. But we still get to do really fun things. I mean, I don't think there's anything too corporate about this page, even though we're trying to make practical, you know, just like business decisions. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of times when we're halfway through a project and we don't necessarily enjoy it anymore. And it's very important to kind of persevere and say, why did we make this to begin with? And is that still good enough reason to continue on? And if the logic makes sense, even though your passion may not be there at that moment, that's kind of the difference between continuing to be independent and maybe just being a hobbyist or, you know, just doing it part-time or failing. Because like Ian was saying, you know, a lot of companies go out and they have this great game design idea and then they fail in like 2 years or something. That's not what I want to do. You know, I want to keep making games. So, you know, persevere. Definitely keep sticking through, because the thing is, you know, a lot of these games I felt that way for a while, but when you come out on the other side of that, man, it just feels so good. And for those of you who've made games, I'm sure you know what that feels like. But and one thing I really want to recommend is, so let's say I've got this game idea, and I think it could be a really good success. I think I could make money at this game design. I think it's really important to say to yourself, not just, is the game design a good game design that could make money, but how long is it going to take me to make this game? And about how much money do I think I might make? Because even a game that makes money, if it took you 2 years to make it, you know, you're probably going to be starving again. So, you know, try to think about that a little bit if you're, you know, wanting to take it to the next level. And I think this is kind of common sense, you know, but I think as an independent, you just want to say, man, I just want to focus on the game. If I just make the right game, the money will come. But it's just not true. I mean, you hear about the successes, but like Ian said, 90% of them, you know, usually you don't hear about. Usually you don't have people up here talking about, you know, how much they fail all the time. So, and, you know, the other thing, too, is like halfway through the game, a lot of times you're going to learn how you could have done the game better than you have been doing. And it's good that you're learning, you know, and it's good that you're identifying things, ways to do things more efficiently, ways that you can improve the performance. But what I want to recommend is try to resist the temptation. You know, if the game is terrible and it's buggy, then yeah, scrap it and kind of start over. But if you're halfway through, you know, if it's far along and it is the game you set out to make, and maybe it's just not quite as good as you now realize it could be, my recommendation is to finish it anyway. And then once you're done, maybe make a sequel and then apply all the things that you learn halfway through the last project. Because the reality is, if you do go back and start over with all the things you just learned, you're going to get halfway again, and you're going to realize, wow, I learned a lot again, and the cycle is vicious. And I've actually seen a lot of independent people who are kind of stuck in this cycle, and you know, they end up not releasing games, or at least they go many years without releasing games. So yeah, I mean, try not to do that. What's great too, especially when you put yourself out there, not only do you have opportunities that arise, when you put it on Newgrounds, you could get feedback from people, and you can learn from that and apply that to your next game. And you know, if you're all in isolation, just continuing to tinker on the same thing, you never quite get to that step. So, and another thing is that, you know, as game developers, we're very passionate about what we do. You know, we set out to make this artwork, you know, that is perfect in a sense. It's perfect in our minds, and we want it to be perfect in reality. But I'm here to say that, you know, perfection doesn't exist. And, you know, I guess some people believe in perfection, but it's just, you know, you can always make it better. And that's like true of any kind of art. You know, you talk to a lot of artists who, you know, there might be something you're like, man, that's so amazing, but they just hate it. They see all its little flaws. You can't get beyond that unless you just accept it's going to not be absolutely perfect, but I'm going to release it anyway. And so I really recommend trying to focus on what matters. You know, so one important decision we made as an independent company is this game at the top that we promoted, it's called the Ballads of Remus. It's our first commercial release of the series. It's a pay-to-play game. We spent about 2 years on it, off and on, while we did other client jobs to make some money to pay for it. And so once we finished at the end of the game, we had a decision, you know, do we do digital rights management? And, you know, it's a controversial kind of topic. There's a lot of people saying just forget it. There's some people saying, no, you got to do DRM. And I was actually an advocate of doing DRM. I'm like, oh, I programmed this. I took forever. I want to protect it. But what we realized was that if I implement, let's say, license keys into my game, what's going to happen is people are going to lose their license keys. They're going to email me. I'm going to have to follow up because they bought this thing, and that's going to take time. I don't have a whole team of people waiting to answer the phone. It's going to be me. It's going to be my partner. And I have to make a decision. You know, am I going to spend my time supporting licensing issues for the next years? I mean, who knows? Or am I going to spend my time developing the next game? Because, you know, especially when the reality is that as an independent person, I'm going to make not the most sophisticated DRM solution. And so the game's, it's going to get cracked anyway, and people are going to steal it anyway. So for us, that was one of the decisions we made to try to not be perfectionists and try to focus on the right things. We chose not to do DRM for Ballads of Remus. So, which means if you wanted to, you could go out and pirate our game right now, probably pretty easily. But you could pay $10 for it and support an independent developer. So we also have a free online demo, just so you know. And another thing is, I was actually on the Cleveland Game Dev Facebook page, and I think somebody was talking about like a Superman game where it wasn't Superman, it was a superhero game, and the guy had the girl, and he was kind of like, when he faced this way, the girl was in his arms, and when he faced this way, all of a sudden she switched. And his question was like, you know, should I draw another running animation and standing animation of him, you know, holding this girl in the other arm so it's not like he's switching? And I mean, when I saw that, I was like, absolutely not. Like, do not make that sprite animation, because if somebody notices, they're not going to care if the game is good. And if you work on that, they won't notice that you worked on that. I mean, so that's kind of like, for me, just trying to make the projects manageable, trying to keep them in scope, because the reality is, even when you take the time to estimate how long it's going to take, it's going to take longer. And even when you try to be conservative, it still takes longer. And the more you can try to bring that in, the more you're going to be happy with being able to get your games out there. So another thing that, you know, we kind of think it works for us is when we make games, we try to think it would be great to make a game that if it becomes successful, I would like it to be something that I could possibly turn into a sequel or a series of games. And I remember hearing the behemoth who makes Castle Crashers and Alien Hominid, I remember them saying that they absolutely refuse to make a sequel to Castle Crashers. And I'm like, why? Please, just make a sequel. I love that game, but I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I mean, as an artist, you don't want to make sequels. You know, a lot of times you want to make the newest thing and wherever your mind takes you, but at least, again, if you set that up so that if a game's successful, you leave that option open for yourself, then, you know, if you have enough money to just do whatever you want, then great. And if not, then, you know, you have something that you know has maybe a greater chance and less risk of succeeding. So, you know, in our case, we're making story-based games, so they're really actually kind of fun to do sequels for. And, you know, that's kind of one way to go. But I think that's part of being practical. It's just that kind of willingness to do stuff like that. And also, I just want to say, you know, definitely hope for the best, but plan for the worst, because, you know, just like I said, your game's not going to, it's going to take longer than you thought. It's also not going to make as much money as you thought. Even when you bring back your estimates, it's still going to make less money than that. I mean, yeah, there are runaway successes, but like Ian said, that 90%, it's probably not going to make as much money. So I'll actually tell you, Ballads of Remus, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud that we were able to get it out there. We had 500 pre-orders, and we didn't use Kickstarter for that. We actually just did it on our own site, which was brand new at the time. So we had 500 pre-orders, and to date we've sold 2,300 copies of this game. And I'm proud of these numbers. You know, I mean, there's games that take longer that sold, you know, 200 copies. But if you think about it, you know, we're selling it for $10 a pop. That's like, you know, $23,000. Or hopefully I'm doing the math right there. Yeah, $23,000 split between two people. And we worked on this for 2 years off and on. Now, we both have mortgages. He's got 2 kids. We both have student loans. That's not a lot of money. And we tried to be extremely conservative about how much money we could make, and it was less. So I guess the thing is, you know, I'm up here talking about how to be successful, but I don't necessarily know the answer, and there is no silver bullet solution, of course. You know, it's just a matter of continuing to try, continuing to learn, and that's something I do every day, is to just see how can I improve, how can I be more practical without losing the passion of independent game developer. And the other thing about Ballads of Remus is it was actually written to be 3 times as long as it actually is. And so, you know, it actually kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and we didn't really want it to be that way. We actually wanted the ending to be, you know, kind of wraps up this nice story arc, but in the end, I mean, it took us 2 years. It would have taken us maybe 6 years or longer to do all of it. So, I mean, that's just one example of how we've had to make sacrifices and compromises to do what we love, but also to just get it out there, maybe start making money, and maybe even use that money to fund the next chapter of the Ballads of Remus. So, one of the last things I kind of just want to cover is, so that's kind of like some business stuff and, you know, just trying to be practical with running an indie business, but so how do you make great games? The first thing I want to say is, I think games that have compelling characters or compelling worlds is extremely important, because I feel like I was less successful as a programmer making my own games than I am now with a partner who's good at the storytelling and the art side of it, because of the fact that, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. You know, I was still learning about game design at the time and all of that, but I think, you know, as a programmer, my mind tends to focus on mechanics and cool little things, but then there's this character and you're like, why do I care? Why am I doing this? Why am I jumping to this portal? I don't care. You know, but if you have a character and you know why he wants to jump through the portal, you could put yourself in his shoes and think, oh, okay, cool. You know, there's a game on Xbox Live Arcade as well called PID. It's an independent game, and it had a pretty neat mechanic, actually. It was really pretty innovative. And I downloaded it, and it was kind of cool, but I realized, you know, is there a story? Maybe there is, but I didn't get it. And the world just didn't seem like there was any intrigue. I'm like, what is this? Why am I here? And I didn't buy it because despite the cool mechanic, it just didn't work for me. So, I think there are a lot of games that you can make without good stories, for sure, and they're great games. But I still think at least if the world sparks your imagination and makes you think, maybe that's why I'm here, maybe that's why I care, then those subtle things can really, make your game stand out in the crowd beyond just the mechanic. And yeah, I definitely owe a lot of the credit there to my partner, Jay Zbarth. So, beyond that, I really don't claim to be an expert at game design. And I think, I don't know if you ever can, even if you have something that's a great game design, it can still fail financially, and we see that all the time. It could be because it wasn't marketed well enough, and it fails anyway. And then, sometimes even if you come up with a great design, it doesn't necessarily mean you can just repeat that and get the same results. So even if you could find some silver bullet that was the perfect game design, in a couple of months, you're going to have to do something else because that's just, it's a subjective industry that we're in. And so that's why a lot of what I'm talking about here is more about how can I do other things to try to mitigate that risk and so I can not be the 90% of businesses that fail so that I can continue to do this. And so, let's see. So yeah, I think game design is just something that you continue to tinker at. It's something you continue to work at, and you never arrive. Like a lot of things, but especially with something as subjective as game design. One of the things that we do that's really cool about us putting ourselves out there, getting a fan base and a newsletter is, we can test ideas. I think Kickstarter is a great way to test ideas. And, because you can just put it out there without having actually made the game yet. And if the money comes, then you finish it. And if not, maybe you work on something else. Another thing that we do, sometimes we'll put out screenshots and just see, what do people think? Do you like this? Does this get you excited? And that's just some ways that you can kind of mitigate the risks of just spending 2 years in total silence making this game just for it to fail in the end and, for you to go out of business. So we actually have a group of fans on our forums and stuff that are I guess like super fans, they're like really excited about everything we put out. But, it's cool because we set up a private forum and we show a lot of our in-work stuff, and they've given us some great feedback. And I actually want to give you one example. My partner Jay and I, with Ballads of Remus, so we had finished the game. It's a nice adventure game, start to finish. It's got a decent story, I think. And so we showed it to these guys saying, hey, what do you think? And they were like, I really like it, but it feels very linear. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, when you love it and you really like the characters, you want to replay it. You want there to be something more to come back to. And we can't get right to the sequel. So, it leaves people feeling a little disappointed, like, man, I wanted more. And so we decided, let's add a little more. How can we give that without spending another year developing? So what we added to the game was these little bugs. Okay, actually, I'll tell you. It's a game about an exterminator, okay? And it's kind of a comical story, but in every scene, we just hid a little bug just up in the corner somewhere. And so, you don't always see them, but when you find them, you just click on them and you squish them. That's it. And we actually added that and like 8 other achievements, some of which were like jigsaw puzzles. We had to find all the pieces. But what's amazing is the bug squishing is what people absolutely loved. People come back to that and they're like, man, the adventure game it's pretty cool, but man, I just love when I find that instant gratification where I can just squish those bugs. And so, that feedback, that early feedback that we got was absolutely critical. And we've had reviews of the games that have said, it's cool that there's like more you can do. So it was absolutely valuable to have that. So test your ideas, as you're going along. And I think the other thing is, have a backup plan. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. As you're testing, the idea is that they might not love it. They might hate it. They might not get it at all. And, if you're not kind of ready, if you're not already thinking about what else to do, and your entire soul is in this idea, and as an independent person, that's really easy to do, then, you might spend months, just trying to figure out, like, well, what do I do? I mean, that was me. I put so much of myself into that. I feel like I'm done. But if you can give yourself to these games, but not give all of yourself, and have something else, maybe another game design, maybe like a contract that you have some flexibility to do on the side, whatever that backup plan is, if you want to survive as an indie, keep that in mind. And so I will say that making games is really, really, really hard. And a lot of people who say they want to make games actually don't. And I think Ian might have mentioned that. Because as a programmer, I'm actually a very analytical person, and I'm not actually that emotional. But when it comes to game design, it is absolutely an emotional roller coaster. And I think a lot of you could probably relate to this. Like I said, there's times when I love my project. I'm totally into it. I'm totally infatuated. And then there's times when I totally hate myself and anything I've ever done. So, I think for that reason it's really hard. But I also think that, anything you do that's worth doing is going to have the lower lows, but also the higher highs. And honestly, when I worked in the corporate environment, you do the 9 to 5. I know what I have to do. I go in, I do it, I leave for the day. I don't have the low lows, but I don't have the high highs either. It's just kind of steady state. I go in, do my job, and I leave. So I guess what I'm saying is, if it gets tough and when it gets tough, persevere. You know what I mean? Try to stick with it. Try to think, how can I come out of this so that you can continue to do what you're passionate about doing for maybe years to come. And so, in my opinion, good game design is really important, but it's really just one piece of the pie. If you have the passion and if you can invest in yourself and educate yourself, if you can collaborate with people and you have a good network of people that you can learn from and that you can also help teach them some of what you've learned and things like that, then, and if you have a willingness to be practical, then I think you have a much better chance at surviving and being successful as an independent game developer. So with that being said, I'd like to open it up for questions, if anyone has any. Yeah.
How do you go about, you talk about your games could be pirated, and you talk about digital rights management.
Yeah.
Is that how you protect your story, or how do you go about protecting all the characters in the world, or how do you go about protecting the story? Just go through normal copyright, the Library of Congress or something?
Yeah, so the question is about digital rights management and how to protect your ideas and your story and your game. They're two separate things because digital rights management prevents a person from taking your game without paying for it. They're not actually reselling it. And so what you're talking about as far as protecting, I think what you're talking about, as far as protecting your ideas so that someone else couldn't take the idea and make their own game and then sell it. Yeah, you definitely can apply for copyrights just like you do with other things. I know that we don't do that, and there's a number of reasons for that. One is your work is copyrighted by default. So even if you don't apply for copyright, anything you make and put out there, automatically copyrighted. It helps definitely if someone actually were to steal it and you needed to follow up legally to actually have the registered copyright. But the other thing about games is that there's a huge precedent for people being able to clone games and get away with it. So unfortunately, especially as an independent person, you could spend a lot of money on copyrights and you could spend a lot of money on a lawyer, but you probably won't even win anyway. And I don't have that kind of money. So I think in our case, we like the fact that we're telling unique stories because if you have a unique mechanic, you can legally steal that almost every time. But if you have unique characters, it's actually, I believe it's more legally protectable because that's a story. A mechanic is, I don't know, there's something about it that's just legally not as protectable. So I think in our case, we're small enough. Actually, there's even been people, we have a game called The Visitor that's a pretty popular series, and there's another game called Demon's Day Out that I think is very heavily inspired by that. And it's different, but it's largely like the same kind of ideas. And, they say that imitation is the highest form of flattery, so we just don't worry about it too much. Yeah. So the question is about collaborating with people, and is it harder to collaborate with someone that's remote, right? I have to say it is. It is harder. You know, it's absolutely amazing that we're in an age where you have high-speed internet and Skype. We get on Skype every day. You know, every time I want to say something, I'm like, hey, can you jump on Skype? We start talking. But having worked in a corporate environment where, you know, I was able to maybe walk over and talk to another engineer and say, you know, what's going on with this bug? Can you help me? And boom, they fix it right then and there. There is a little bit of a delay. I think if you're small enough, it's very doable. You know, the bigger you get, I think it can get a little harder. But the other thing is, if your skills complement each other very well, it tends to work better. I think, you know, a lot of the games we've released since he and I have started working together, as much as I do game design, I've kind of let him do the design and I help with it, but it's mainly his design. And that's been helpful because there's been a couple projects where we've both tried to design it, and without being in the same room and having the whiteboard and that whole experience, it is harder. It is totally harder. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're a programmer and an artist and you kind of have clearly defined roles, you could definitely make it work, and we've been able to. Any other questions? Yeah? So the question is, what distribution channels did we choose, and why did we choose those? For a while, we used FlashGameLicense.com. And it's a site where you can make a game and then find a sponsor. And that was one of the channels that we chose. And it's nice because it's like people are bidding on sponsoring your game. And if you can actually get a couple interested buyers that have a decent amount of money, you can make a decent amount of money at that. So, which is why the reason we chose it is, for instance, Visitor Massacre at Camp Happy, I don't know if my contract says that I'm allowed to say this, but that one we got a sponsorship for $18,000. And we made it in about a month. Now, I have to say that's been the exception, not the rule, because I guess I won't say which one, so I'm not violating a more contract. But other games we've released made like $3,000 and took us a month and a half. So that's been more so the rule than the exception. So and the other thing is, people are moving away from Flash games and going more on mobile. And I think it's because people like to sit on their couch with their mobile devices that don't run Flash. And so I've noticed that right about when we got the 18,000 was right about the peak. They actually have a chart on Flash Game License where right at that peak is where we were, and I've noticed it started to go down. So we haven't actually done it. We've been trying to move more into mobile games now. Actually, right now, we're making an iPhone game using Marmalade, which is a cross-platform C++ development environment. And so, yeah, I mean, we're trying to follow that trend and kind of move into that. And, you know, it's not released yet. I can't even talk about it yet, actually. So we'll see if that one works. But, yeah, I mean, I think when you're starting, that Flash Game License is still a really good thing to have. But I will say, one thing that's bad about it is you've already made the game, and then you're asking for money, which you might not get it. And sponsors know that you're the one in the weak position. You've already invested the time. You need the money. And they're like, hey, here's a bone. Take it or leave it. So, you know, use it for what it is. Hopefully that answers the question. Was there another question over here? Okay. Yeah. How much time do we spend supporting our games? I think the fact that we didn't use digital rights management, we didn't do online multiplayer, it makes it a lot easier to support. It's a single-player game. You get it, it goes in your computer, and you're done. We haven't actually got a lot of support. I think a lot of the support questions are people who haven't bought it yet, who have questions about, well, what do I get when I buy it? You know, does it have, they don't ask if there's DRM, but, you know, they just ask questions like, you know, is my son going to be able to play it on his iPhone? Right now, we don't have it on there. So stuff like that, you know, I try to get back to, I actually do that myself. It's not really that hard. I might get an email every couple of days. And just to give you some perspective, our game released about a year ago, and today we're still selling more than one a day. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like more than one every single day on average. So at that rate of sale, we're not getting a lot of support, questions. But, our thinking is that even though it's kind of a slow trickle now, if it doesn't taper off and we could just add another trickle onto that and another trickle, that if they continue to go on, then, that's one of our kind of business ideas. But yeah, the support hasn't been that much. And the other thing I will say on that too is, I think it's important when people email you to email them back. It sounds obvious, and I don't always do it. I mean, we get thousands of emails. I'm sure we all do. But, especially when you're independent, no matter how big you get, every single person is possibly a paying customer or a fan or whatever. And not responding could make you lose them. And maybe they'll talk bad about you or whatever. So, try to say, hey, thanks for the kind words or whatever it is. So yeah, I think I do more of that than just support. But yeah.
What marketing have you found the most useful?
Yeah, I should have covered that actually. I'm glad you asked. So what marketing have we used? In our case, we had a series of games called The Several Journeys of Remus. There had been 4 that released so far. And we thought to ourselves, well, we could make something new, but maybe we could continue something that already has a fan base and sell that and see if that works. It was kind of a grand experiment for us. It took us a lot longer than we thought it would take to make it, but the way we marketed it and the way that's been the most successful for us is we released a free game that continues the series of free games, and then there's a lot of links in the free game that point to our paid game. And so I think it's great because, it continues to work for us. That's what's so awesome about it. If you pay an AdSense campaign and you're paying like $1 an ad or click or whatever, that eventually that gets pretty expensive, especially if they're not actually buying your game, when they click through. Whereas this is just out there, just working for us every day. And I think that's why it continues to trickle in. So, and just to give you some numbers on that, Several Journeys of Remus, Chapter 4, within 3 weeks we had reached 1 million viewers. And so these are free-to-play players, so they're not necessarily paying customers. I think our conversion rate was a lot less than 1%. I don't know what it ended up being, but still, 1 million people, we did convert some of those over. Like I said, it still trickles in. So we've done that, and we also have done, we contacted review sites, and JA's Games is kind of a fan of ours, and so we talked to them and things like that. We gave out, here's something else. Anybody who asks you for a free copy of your game that says they're a reviewer, just give it to them. And I know that sounds weird because, again, that's kind of like the DRM idea. Part of me was like, oh, I want to vet them and make sure that they're actually legitimate because I don't want some punk saying, "I'll give me a free game." But I'm like, you know what? It's just like the DRM. They could steal it if they want it, but they're asking me. And if they claim to want to review it, I don't even care how big your site is, anything. It's like, anybody here, you could say, hey, can I have a free game? I want to review it. Boom, there you go. You got it. I hope you would actually review it, though, if you would. So I think that's useful, too. We're independent. We're not getting, big sites to review our game. So every little independent, blog or whatever, to us is valuable. But I also will say that we should have done more. We definitely underestimated how much we needed to market. We thought that the existing fan base would magically kind of carry us further than it did. I definitely recommend, allocate whatever percentage of time making the game and then give yourself a month or two. Even if you're a small independent, just take a month or two to just contact review sites, put out a press release, send physical copies of your game to review sites. That's something we didn't do, and it's something I want to do next time so that hopefully they can take it a little bit more seriously. We got 2 minutes, so if there's any other questions, one more question? Yeah.
Since you're the programmer and he's the artist, I'm assuming you guys also need sound and voice.
Yeah.
Do you have someone that you normally work with on that?
I have to say, the question is, how do we find our sound and audio creators? We do get other people to do it. We pay contracts. Sometimes we'll do a royalty deal where we pay them a little bit up front and then pay more as the game sells. I've actually been very fortunate because my partner Jay, he used to have a animated show on Canadian networks called Sons of Butcher, and in that experience, it's like a cartoon, but he's also acting in it. So he knows a lot of people in the industry, and so he also is in a band for the same show. It's very interesting, but through that, he knows like musicians, he knows sound designers, and also we get a lot of people just saying, hey, I do music. Let me know if you want me to do your next game or something. We get that like all the time. So we kind of have a good pool of people to choose from. And something I will say too is there are people who are willing to kind of do it for the exposure. I hate to exploit that because, I think people should get paid for what they do. But, if you can get someone that's like willing to maybe do the music for your Kickstarter, but then if the Kickstarter succeeds, then you pay them a portion of the Kickstarter. Arrangements like that, it's the type of stuff that we've been able to do. But yeah, for like audio and stuff, we've used soundsnap.com. It's like, I think we paid a couple $100 for like a year and you got their whole library. So yeah. And also we did voice acting for Ballads of Remus too. Newgrounds.com has a lot of voice actors and most of them did it for free. Some of them were friends of Jay's. I did the voice of the seagull if you guys are interested. And Jay did the voice of Liam, the little purple bear there. So, yep. All right. Well, thanks. Appreciate you guys listening. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to just grab me, pull me aside, just ask whatever you want, talk to me, whatever. Thanks.
You'll let everyone know that there's a raffle for a weighted companion cube in just a couple minutes at the Smiling Cafe.
If anybody didn't hear that, they're going to be doing a raffle for a weighted companion cube over at the Smiling Cat Entertainment booth sometime in the next 5-10 minutes. 5-10 minutes. All right. We've got another panel that is going to start in here in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's Down to Business with myself and Tom. That's Square Shooters and Uncle Slam. And there's still the game design improv happening in the back in the workshop.